I'm Carmen Wild, and this is Business Without Barriers, the show with the mission to prove you can break through barriers when you bring humanity back to business. Our guest today is Angus Brown, a banking guru and Bitcoin entrepreneur who spearheads cutting-edge initiatives in the financial services industry in South Africa and beyond. His passion is to challenge current industry models and add tangible value for customers. This is a man who knows how to get record-breaking results. He founded the acclaimed eBucks loyalty program at FNB. This business made a real mark on the South African e-commerce, banking, and loyalty landscape. As CEO of e-delivery at FNB and then head of alliance banking at Mercantile Bank, he grew profits greater than 50% year on year. As an entrepreneur, Angus founded Banking Acumen in 2012, Signet in 2016, and is also the co-founder of Centbee, a Bitcoin-based payment service with the goal to offer the fastest, cheapest, and best way to pay for goods and services at any retailer around the world. They are providing the on-ramps to the Bitcoin superhighway. He's also the chairman of the Oxford Business Alumni Johannesburg chapter and a mentor for Google Launchpad Africa, providing mentorship and coaching to African startups. Angus has the ability to master complex situations and create strategies and solutions that deliver outstanding results. And we have the privilege of finding out just how he does this in the next hour. A very warm welcome to you, Angus.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I see on your infographic that you must be an avid traveler, having reviewed over 70 cities on TripAdvisor. If you've seen so many cities, which one would you say is one of your favorite, or are there a few?
Oh, it's a great question. And I guess I have a completer finisher style, which means that when I start something like on TripAdvisor, I'm quite likely to finish going through all the cities and do everything. Part of my personality is I like to complete things. I like to see things through to the finish. I like to start things, but I like to finish them. Mm-hmm. And I've had the pleasure of being in many cities in many countries. But I look at it as also the countries I haven't been to. So to me, South America, the entire continent is a gaping hole that I wish I spend more time in. China, I've only been to Hong Kong, which isn't really all of China. It's a tiny little taste of it. So there's lots of the East that is still there. Places I love, I've had some very happy times in Europe. I enjoy traveling. I've traveled a lot through Europe, all the way around, north, south, etc. Still missing Spain. So it's one of my places to get to is Barcelona and to Madrid. But I'd say probably the south of France is a happy place. The climate, a bit like the Cape. People are friendly. It's got lots of history. So I'd say probably there, with a combination of also a lot of really nice places in South Africa. I've had the privilege of traveling around my own country a lot. And still do. As soon as these lockdowns ease a little bit, plan to get traveling again.
Absolutely. I think we're all wanting to just, if you didn't have a travel bug before, I think we've all got one now. So
yes, indeed.
Many people would say that it must be pretty awesome to be locked up on an island. I live in Mauritius, but hell, when you can't get off, it's a different story. So... So out of all those there must be a barrage of amazing memories. If you just span your memory banks right now, what comes to mind as a beautiful moment of travel? What's the first image?
I think perhaps seeing the tulips in Holland. There was a week that I was in Holland visiting in Amsterdam and managed to see the tulips just literally that week that they came out. Literally those fields just go on and on with the color and how it's so ordered and yet so beautiful and disordered in a sense because it's natural. It's a natural environment as well. So I really enjoy that. That would just come to mind. Maybe it's also on that trip that I managed to make some business breakthroughs as well. So also managed to effectively start the Bitcoin business that I'm in now at Centbee. Was pretty much onto the same trip. And that was some of the seeds and the bulbs that were founded there have been flowering in my business life as well.
Wow, isn't it amazing how your memory takes you? You've got this array of experiences, and it takes you to that little snapshot that has a happy association with your business. So it's really amazing how our mind has the capability of doing that. And when you said tulips, I just saw yellow. I don't know if there's many different colors, because I haven't seen those fields. But I just saw this yellow happy color, which was beautiful. So thanks for sharing that. So you've mentioned Bitcoin and in that experience, and we know that the future looks very different right now than we ever thought it might be. Tell us about specifically the future of money and so your perspective of what that looks like.
Oh, wow, that's a question that's this big, and this deep as well. So given time, I'm trying not to go too deep on it and maybe just spend time on the width. I've spent a lot of time in banking and spent a lot of time with money. And money has some purposes. If you look in the dictionary, it's a unit of account, it's a unit of exchange, and a store of value are the traditional definitions of what is money. And it's all very technical and all very academic, but really it looks to what purpose does money serve? It has a purpose and it has a use, otherwise it wouldn't be around. And it's been around for a very long time, many different forms of money. And I guess it also takes me back to the eBucks days. I was one of the founding team of eBucks back in 2000. We actually formed the business as a little working team in late 1999, just before the millennium. And we were looking into what is e-commerce. And so this takes us to where we are now. We've seen a big spike in e-commerce with the change in lockdown, physical distancing, not as much physical commerce. So e-commerce has jumped massively. And we were looking into e-commerce back in 99. And we formed eBucks as a business, with a team of people. And it was the first Rand's e-commerce venture. That was it. Explore e-commerce. What does it mean? And one of the things we came up with was a new form of money called eBucks. So we said we want to create eBucks, which is a digital store of value, which people could receive and transact in and spend online. So it's funny how you look at a digital store of value that could be used to transact was an idea that we came up with in 2000. And it wasn't an original idea. We copied other people like Digital Gold and that who are doing the same thing. But now to be involved since 2016 in Bitcoin, which is a digital store of value, which is used for transacting and payments, it's funny how that circle comes back. So back then we were still, thinking about money and what is the attributes of money. So what's really important is that it must be able to be used easily and quickly. So it doesn't matter, if it's gold, it's not usable because it's like you can't slice off a tiny little piece of gold to pay for something. It's not practical. That's why coins got smaller and smaller to be practical and divisible. But digital money is very, very useful. And actually, most of the money we use nowadays is digital money. So when you pay with your card, you're not paying with your card. Your card is just a piece of plastic. You're paying with your digital money, which is stored at the bank. So the future of money is digital. There's a clear trend towards digitization of money. The vast majority of money that exists now is money that exists in the bank, not in the vaults, in notes, but in their ledgers, their digital ledgers. So the future of money is digital, and it needs to be fast and cheap. And one thing that Bitcoin has looked at is there is possible to create a permissionless money. In other words, it's not the bank that holds your money. The money is held by the network. We have a lot of faith nowadays in the network. We have more faith in the network than we have in the institution. So we will trust the Twitter network, not necessarily a particular person. Maybe not even Twitter, the company, but the fact that the network exists. So we have faith in networks, and it's possible to have money that is network money. In other words, not controlled by one bank or one particular person, but is reliable because it's coded to be structured in a way. So that's where Bitcoin is itself very interesting, because it is permissionless in that sense. The permissions are baked into the code. It's also fast and cheap, and it's boundaryless. It's very important for money to be boundaryless. We live in a physical location. You live in Mauritius. Lucky for you, particularly after hours, you can enjoy the scenery. But wherever you live, you tend to interact with your local environment. You pay for parking, you buy a coffee, but you also interact in a global world, a world where you're buying goods and services from Apple, from Google. You're buying Fortnite credits to play online. You're doing all sorts of things that are international. So your money should be as international as your services are. Even when we lock down in one particular location or one town, we are still consuming and interacting in a global world. So money needs to be international, and it needs to be easy and cheap. That's also part of the attributes. It's not just that it's cut up into tiny little digital slices, digital cents, etc., but it must also be easy to use, which also then talks to a part of money, which is who owns that money, is your identity. It's a very interesting piece that we also had to look at back in those days, and we've looked at since, is about what is your digital identity? Who are you online? How do you prove who you are online to the person you're interacting with, to a merchant? How do you know that the merchant that you're paying is actually the merchant delivering you those goods and services as well? So there's a level of digital trust that also needs to happen in a level of digital money. So I've been exploring that probably for the last 20 years, since the days of eBucks, when we put together, which was at the time the world's first bank-backed digital currency. And I've been involved in many different internet banking initiatives for many different businesses around South Africa and around the world, and involved also in digital identity, trying to understand and really work with simple digital identity so you can prove who you are, and therefore your money is as good as you. It's not just the money, there's also a level of money. And we might even talk about how Bitcoin is not perfectly anonymous either. People have this idea, oh, Bitcoin, it's anonymous. It's, guys with masks on and hackers. And that's not actually true at all. There are, of course, fraudsters and hackers everywhere. But don't go and look at Bitcoin as being the place of the bad stuff. That's just because we live in society.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So
big question. Sorry, I tried to cover the width and not as much depth.
So much stuff there. So if we bring that back to Bitcoin, and if we look at fast, cheap, boundaryless trust, do you think Bitcoin can reshape our world for the better?
I think it already has been. Bitcoin's been around as a system, a protocol as code for 10 years now. So it was put together by a person called Satoshi Nakamoto, who's not actually a person, it's a pseudonym for probably a group of people who put together and published a white paper and put together some technology. It's been operational for 10 years. It's running on more than 10,000 servers around the world, so it's very distributed. It's a global network that just literally runs like the way you send an email to me. We don't know where it goes or who's handling it. It runs off this distributed network that just makes sure it gets there. So Bitcoin is already out there doing this job. There are something like 60 million people around the world who have purchased cryptocurrency and own cryptocurrency. In South Africa alone, we are sitting with probably over 3 million, maybe 4 million people who have bought cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and used it. So it's there, it's present. And it's particularly if you look at how much people are searching for it. The search term, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, etc., is there a lot. A lot of South Africans, a lot of emerging market customers are looking for a store of value that is cheap, fast, and international. And so, yeah, it's already there. It's already doing the job. What it's not doing yet is it's not widely adopted, and it's not properly regulated yet. So I think those are the two areas that we'll see change coming now. More regulation around who can, provide a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency service. I see a lot of good change coming there quite soon, and then also being used. Actually seeing it used for payment. So when you go to take a lot and you make a payment, pay with Bitcoin should just be up there on that list.
Absolutely.
It used to be that Microsoft, you wanted to buy a Microsoft product, you could pay with Bitcoin for your Microsoft Xbox Live or Microsoft Office subscription, etc. Seeing those coming in where it's useful so that I can just pay quickly and easily. So that is what we see as where the future is coming. Bitcoin as simple money, as simple digital quick money.
So the level of adoption will probably, absolutely will increase as the fear of this unknown is broken down. Could you give us, for those who've not invested or not even considered it as an investment opportunity, give us 3 good reasons why it should be a consideration, to just break down some of the myths maybe and the fears around this unknown.
Yeah, well, I think there are quite a few myths. The one myth is that it's used by scammers and people for illegal activities, and that is a myth and a truth. Like all issues, money or any forms of money is used by scammers and that sort of stuff. That is absolutely true. Is it prevalent? No. I mean, last time we looked at 0.08% of the Bitcoin that was being held on exchanges comes from an illicit source. Compare that to the Kroll report that says $1 in $5 is being held or being created illicitly. Money is used by criminals, and they obviously try and source it and use it. So I don't think it's at all fair or accurate to say that Bitcoin is there just because a few people have used it for bad purposes. It doesn't taint the rest of that. So I think that's one myth, is it is actually quite normal for ordinary people to have Bitcoin and use Bitcoin. The other one is potentially that you can only buy a Bitcoin, and a Bitcoin is very expensive. Which is sort of understandable if you think of it like a Kruger Rand, or a gold dollar, which is quite expensive to buy. But it's not like that, it's digital. So you can have tiny millionths of that. So you can buy $10 worth of Bitcoin, of any form of cryptocurrency. You can buy, and you can send 1 cent of Bitcoin from somebody to somebody else, 1 Rand cent. You can send tiny amounts because it's digital. Just because one whole Bitcoin is worth, $1,000 or something like that, doesn't mean you can't buy 1,000th of that. You buy whatever you want to buy in whatever your currency is, and that then belongs to you. So it isn't actually expensive in that sense. It is what it is. It's as simple as what the current exchange rate is. And the last one maybe is it an investment? Personally, I don't hold any Bitcoin. I have in the past had a little bit of Bitcoin. I've sold some. I've had it really just to understand how it is. I don't think you should have a view that you should get rich from Bitcoin. I think you get rich from using your mind and using your labor and using your social connectedness and your gifts to the world. That's what makes you rich, not some Bitcoin that's going to make you rich. If you're expecting that, well, there's lots of scammers waiting for you, and they will introduce you to lots of different opportunities where they will promise you lots of things. Bitcoin's not going to make you rich. Bitcoin is a currency. You use it to buy goods and services. Yes, its price may go up. Its price will almost certainly go down as well. If I knew the order in which that would happen, I would be a rich man.
Yeah.
I'm not. So yeah, I think from an investment perspective, I would say just be cautious. Don't look at this as some magic bullet. If you want to buy some Bitcoin, feel free, experiment with it, but only what you think is considerate and cautious. And also be very aware that the price of all cryptocurrencies is volatile. It goes up and down. But then again, we live in South Africa. Many of your viewers are living in emerging markets. The fiat currency is volatile there as well. The Rand goes up and down every day. Lots of currencies go up and down. So I think that's where some of the appeal is to emerging market customers, is that volatility is normal. People expect prices and things to go up and down. I'd say in quite a few countries, Bitcoin is less volatile than their national currency.
Okay, awesome. So it's an alternative. It's a it's a different way of exchange, and so you've actually broken it down and almost made it it's just another form of currency, and it's just for us to understand its utility and where we would use it, which I think what Centbee is. Maybe you can give us an understanding of the role of Centbee and how this is, why it's important to offer a service like you're offering through your company.
Yeah, I think that also goes back to my own personal background and what I've been involved in. I've been lucky enough to have had a beautiful career with some amazing people in some great banks and non-banks, and most of it has been in the payment space. So I'm not really a lender or an investment or stockbroker type banker. As a banker, I'm more of a payments person. I've been in all the different payments, from online payments, card payments, those sort of systems. And I look at those technologies, and I've worked very, very closely looked at that technology stack, and it's old. All of the bank's technology systems are built on very, very old infrastructure and very old systems. At one of the banks that I was working at, we did a replacement of the core banking system, the entire core banking stack, took it out, replaced it with new systems, new software, etc. And that was an amazing project to be involved with, fascinating to look at it. But you realize even then, the banking tech is quite old-fashioned. The thinking, the systems design is quite old-fashioned. And the way banks interact with each other is also in quite a structured, old system. Literally files get uploaded and downloaded. It's not real time. It's, things happen in batch. Files can get lost, files can get corrupted, people can make finger trouble, they're duplicate files. Those are the things that we look at as being almost, as old school as using modems, is the actual banking tech behind that, is that old school. Even cards. Card payments that you use now to buy something, that was, it was perfected in the 70s, and nothing really has happened to it since then. Now you've got a check digit on the back. It's still the same very, very old-fashioned technology using business rules that are old-fashioned. So that's where I look at Bitcoin and say Bitcoin has been invented literally in 2010 with a modern design. So it's still a ledger, it has a credit and it has a debit. Mm-hmm. It credits this account and debit that account. And there's a Bitcoin which is used for how much is moved, and there's a data field. But it moved to a completely new technology stack of a distributed ledger, full of jargon over there. What it means is that same record is written in many, many, many places across the internet. So that if you want to find out, is that transaction true, you can look in many, many different places. And there's a cryptographic proof that proves that that was actually the right transaction by people who were authorized to make that transaction. That's what the cryptographic proof is actually there. So what it gives me as a user is assurance that I don't have to go to one place to look whether that record is correct, and I can get assurance from a mathematical sense that that payment has actually been made, and I can trust and rely on it, which means that I can trust to be able to give over my goods and services, to hand over my car or my shopping basket as a merchant to that. So I've got a payment system that I can trust, but it's built on quite a different business model and economic model than the way the existing system's built. So that's where the technology is actually really important. The Bitcoin itself is actually just a little incentive that was put into the system to make sure the system works properly. The Bitcoin is, in a sense, maybe a droplet of oil into these gears to make them all work. But it's the gears that are important. Okay. It's actually the system that then is actually working backwards and forwards that you can then trust. And that's why Bitcoin was built to be global. It is not built in one country. It is not run by one country, by one system. It's intrinsically built out there, but you can use it locally. So it's like we pull something down from the cloud to use it to send a payment to you or to pay for a merchant transaction, but it's intrinsically from the cloud without having to convert. That's the way it works. And the easiest way of doing it is to get yourself a Bitcoin wallet. There's ones like Centbee or other wallets out there. Download the wallet onto your phone or onto your desktop. Get yourself, literally you can get $10 worth of Bitcoin to start off. And then you can see, actually, I can send money to a friend and I can send it on my phone and it arrives there within seconds, literally 2 seconds, and they get confirmation and it's moved. And there's nobody else involved. It just moved. My wallet sent the Bitcoin, their wallet showed that they arrived. It didn't need some payment system that it had to go and connect to and use. It just worked. That's why technology is actually important. And that's why I do believe that people like banks and payment systems and regulators need to actually look at this and say, we can use this. This is a way of us fundamentally rewiring the background of our payment systems to be able to use it. And they are. Our banks have looked at this. They've looked at their own versions of Bitcoin. There's quite a few different technology flavors that they've looked at, and they've proven that it actually does work quite well. The Reserve Bank in South Africa did an experiment called Project Corker, which was actually very successful, and they were able to take the transactions for the entire payment system and play them between the banks. They each implemented their own version, and the payment system is able to work on this new technology. So they're able to run it live in real time. So regulators and banks are looking at it. They're still a bit nervous about the idea that it's not controlled by one regulator or by one bank, etc. That's conceptually challenging for them to do. But certainly they look at the technology and they say the technology is interesting and sound. It's about how do we connect it to our existing banking system. That's the challenge that I think a lot of regulators and banks are looking at now. It's out there. How do we bring it here? And if they don't get it right, well, they're going to get bypassed. Customers are already discovering the world of Bitcoin out there, and they can do this without needing a bank or a regulator. So, regulators and banks have a commercial pressure to get connected, make this work, or they're going to become irrelevant.
So how long do you think it's going to take for us to see a far wider adoption of this?
Well, I think that all depends on regulatory attitudes. So a regulator has significant power in a market to ban something or to say to people, you can't do that, etc. They also have a positive power of saying, we like this, we think this is useful, please can you people, entrepreneurs, business people, banks, you can use this and we support you using it. It also depends on there being usefulness. Just because a tech is interesting or effective doesn't mean it gets used. It has to have a use over and above the technology. So it's those attributes of, is it fast? Is it cheap? Is it reliable? Is it trustworthy? Does it scale? Can I put thousands of transactions onto this? Can I legally rely on this? When I'm having a dispute with somebody, can I actually go and put these documents in front of a magistrate and he will say, yes, I believe your version of the truth because you've got evidence. These are all important parts that have to come together. And personally, I think all of those attributes are there. We're using Bitcoin ourselves in a remittance business that we're running. So we're sending money into Nigeria. Well, customers are sending money to Nigeria using a Bitcoin business that we've set up. We've got a merchant business, which allows a merchant to download an app, which they can show to customers, and customers can scan with their QR codes and make payments. So we're seeing real things like that, but they have to have value to the merchant. They have to have value to the customer. And that value is the simple things that we, find that it's got to be cheap, it's got to be quick, got to be reliable. I've got to know about it, and I've got to trust it, that it works. And the best way of obviously doing that is when you've experienced it, when you've actually downloaded, used it, seen that it works, and you go, well, it's not fancy, it just works.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what it's like to work in, you've got a business in a market that's still rising up in terms of adoption levels. You've got regulators still sussing it out. It's there's many barriers. Your experience. So how do you operate with optimism in a business that's just you're surrounded with these barriers, because that's an interesting, most people avoid these barriers. You've plowed yourself right into it. Tell us how you operate and what's your secrets to overcoming these massive barriers you face?
I think it's, I guess, a bit like walking into, I'll use two metaphors. The one is you walk into a house that's in a good neighborhood, but a bit run down, hasn't been looked after. And many people will look at that house and go, geez, kitchen tiles are ugly, got a bit of damp in the walls. I don't particularly like it. So I can't see myself living in this house. And so they walk away. And there are some people who can go, I can, fix the damp. I can do a fresh coat of paint. We can open up that window and I can see myself living there. A lot of it is, it's the same house to both people. It's exactly the same factual situation, but some people can see it as what it's not, and some people can see it as what it could be. I'm in the headspace of, I see what it could be, but it's still factually the same thing. You still have to see the rot in the house. You have to see that as well. So that's one metaphor, is that I can see it that way. And the other one might be that I quite like getting into boats that are in dry lake beds. There is a tide that is going to rise. I have confidence that, when you look on the riverbank, you can see that, yes, this has been a river before. And but I like to be in that boat, even if I look outside and there's no water or only a little trickle of water running past outside. I quite like that, because I prefer to be in the boat when it's dry than you're trying to climb in the boat when the flood is coming past and, everyone is trying to get into the boat. So I like to be in early, and I think in my career, I've done a lot of things like that, where you jump into things even when other people look at it and go, it's not going to happen. I go back to some of my early days in eBucks, when people are going, e-commerce sounds interesting, but no one's really going to do it. The market is so small for those people, and no one will ever buy groceries online. And well, there isn't a music market because you buy music in CDs and you listen to them on your stereo. So that was, we were fortunate that we took investments, and we took, some bold decisions at the time to invest in e-commerce and to invest in internet banking. I mean, that was FNB's internet banking service, and invest in mobile banking, which is one of the things we built as well, along with, great people like Len Pinot and Jacques Cilliers, to build mobile banking out and then say, yes, there's not a lot of people doing banking on their phone. And at the time, it was flip phones. I mean, who would do banking on a Nokia flip phone? It's like, it made no sense. But you persist with it, you see where it is now, and, you can't open and operate a bank account now without having a smartphone that authenticates transactions. You literally can't bank without a mobile phone. So it's having an understanding that the market will come to you. What you don't know is how long it will take.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes longer than you are prepared to wait. I've been in some businesses where I know that it's going to happen. I just don't have that time frame. So you have to get started and then bail out before it gets to the end. And some businesses, you have the fortune to see the tide rising around you, and you can take advantage and you can grow your business with it. And some businesses, unfortunately, the tide takes far too long to come in. It's beyond your time span, and you don't know. But that's what taking, a business is. Business is taking a risk and taking a chance and looking critically at what the opportunities could be, what the risks are, what your personal risk appetite is, what's the payoff profile. That's all part of being an entrepreneur. And I guess it's not mathematical. It's intrinsic. It comes in the gut somehow. And you make lots of mistakes. You make no mistake about it. I have made lots of mistakes, and hopefully we'll make lots more.
Exactly. Well, that's showing that you trying things and doing things and exploring. I want to get more into your mind space, Angus, because what seems very normal to you is not necessarily, the kind of thing that other people will do and jump into a boat in dry sand and think that, or believe that the tide is going to come in. So how have you trained your mind to see what others can't see?
Wow. It's, I think the most important one is ask the question why. Is whatever you're looking at, ask why. Why is it as it is? Firstly, are you seeing it as it is? Like, what is the lens that you are actually looking through? And are you looking through a clear pane of glass and seeing things as they are? Or are you seeing things through a filter of your own desires and needs and emotions and your projected reality? So make sure you are looking at something clearly. Get the facts. So if you want to know what is going on in a payment system, get the facts of what's actually going on. So see clearly at things. Then ask, why are things as they are? What are the barriers to something changing? Because there will always be. Things are as they are for real reasons, whether they be technical reasons or lack of money or people not being, not competitors not coming into the market or not doing something, but there are actually reasons why. Try and understand what those reasons are. And often they are intangible and human reasons. So why are you not succeeding at work with this great business idea? You're not succeeding because you're not selling to your executives who have the purse strings. Why are you not selling to those executives? What is it that they're not buying?
Yes.
You're not appealing to some particular aspect that they would say yes to. Or there is some reason why they are saying no, which is an intrinsically human reason. Risk appetite, fear of change, all those sort of things. But actually dig into the why. When you've got an understanding of why, face it honestly. Sometimes those are things that are bigger than you. You can't fix it. You can't change it. Know your own self as to what you are able to actually change. And if there are things that you can validly do, like when we were building eBucks, we needed money, we needed like a support team, we needed various technology. Okay, so we can do this. We have a customer base, we have some money that we've got. Okay, so we can change these following things. What are the things we can't change? Okay, so we know ABSA customers are not going to come and do this. It's going to be these customers. So we direct our energy at what you can influence and change. Focus your energy onto that, and then have a plan to do something about it. Action. The world doesn't happen from wishful thinking. And I have seen other innovators and entrepreneurs who jump into dry boats and dry riverbeds who then just sit there. I've got the right idea. I'm in the right place. I know it's going to happen, but I'm actually just sitting in my boat. You actually need to do something. You need to have some active action rather than just being in the right place or having the right vision. As Michael Jordan, who was the first CEO of eBucks, is very well known for saying, is an idea and a PowerPoint deck get you nowhere. I will not invest in your PowerPoint slide. I will invest in your business once you've demonstrated that you've actually done something about it. Got out there, gone and build a prototype, whether that prototype be of a coffee machine or build a little coffee stand and show that you're able to sell coffee to people and that you have coffee selling skills and that you're able to, actually make a little bit of money out of it. Show me something that's real and something that's tangible and get started. Because then I can see that there's actually some opportunity for what you're doing, and you have the intrinsic attributes of an entrepreneur of effort and energy that I can continue to invest in. Because it's not just an idea. An idea doesn't make money. People make money. Absolutely. Teams of people make money. And that's what you're actually always going to be looking to invest in as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as somebody wanting to hire team members. I want to look and get team members into my business. I want to know that they are actually going to be actively working and doing things with me in that, and that I can build on that energy to create value.
Would you say that is your sort of your launch pad for most things in terms of the way you think, when you're very revolutionary in your thinking? So is that your launch pad, this why, and the way in which you would then handle challenges and the way in which you would hire, make sure you're hiring the right person? Does it always come back to this why and then the string of questions that follow through from there?
I'd say probably, although I think by now in my life I've become a little more instinctual. I sometimes have this process operating at an instinctual level. But you have a challenge, and there are challenges every day. I mean, this day brings me 3 different challenges that I have to deal with today. Think about why that is occurring. Think about what you can do about it. What is the right thing to do about it? And sometimes that also means don't do anything. It's also possible to choose whether you react to something. A competitor drops their price. Do you respond to it? Or maybe this is a learning opportunity to figure out how price sensitive the market is. Don't necessarily react. Say, okay, let's leave it for 2 weeks. Carefully monitor volumes, and let's see if actually the customer doesn't respond on price, and we can keep our price point as they are. Time is an important element, choosing when to do something. We've got a great service that we will want to offer in the Centbee wallet. It is live. We're not telling people about it yet. We're choosing what's the right time to actually talk about that particular service, when it's most relevant to customers, when the effort and energy of putting marketing money into telling somebody is going to best correlate with getting some action out of it. So again, thinking about what do you do and why do you do it, and then doing something like actively, actually working on something and not just saying, okay, well, now we're going to do it. Have a plan, have an action plan, like I talked about it now. Have a marketing plan where you know exactly who you're talking to, what is your selling proposition, why the customers would be better off by buying something from you than not. How are you getting that message to them cost effectively? How can they act on that message? How can they buy your product and make you money? And how can you sense whether this is actually working or not all the way through? It's not about telling people about your product. It's building through that entire cycle to make sure that you know, minute by minute, day by day, is this actually working or not, and fixing it, continuously adjusting and fixing it. And I think also that's part of any successful entrepreneur, and I've worked with some amazing entrepreneurs who've got much more entrepreneurial chops than me, and they are continuously sensing. They've got these radar, these feelers out there, and they're always sensing. They might have a belief, but often they're doing more listening than telling. They're listening to the world. They're sensing, is this working, is this not working, etc.
Fantastic. Wow. You've given us such an amazing insight into how that mind thinks, this revolutionary mind of yours, and how, I mean, it just comes, the way in which you relay it, I can see it just comes naturally to you. So the thinking process and the series of questions you go through is just a natural process for you. Do you do that on your own, or do you do it with teams? Tell us how important it is so you've given us a very good indication of how important the thinking process is, and the questioning process, and the listening. And how important is it to bring other people into your thinking process?
It's a great question, and I think my style is intrinsically, naturally, a bit of a loner. I tend to think and do most of that work by myself. Maybe that's my historical background, my circumstance. I'm an only child, so I tended to come from, do things yourself, like get yourself through varsity, get yourself through, your matric, make your decisions pretty much by yourself. So I had to have many voices in my head, but they were all me having to go, okay, think about this and argue about that. But I'd say my intrinsic style is self-reliant and self-contained on that space. What I have learned is the power of teams, particularly for thinking and diversity. So diversity is commonly thrown around in many different ways. But from a thinking perspective and experience perspective, when you're actively open to it and you bring in people who have different experiences, different backgrounds, different cultures, different ages, etc., you actually can tap onto all of that. And that wisdom is incredibly powerful. And I saw that coming into play probably the first time when I was at FNB. We had a program that operated at FNB called VUGA. It was led by Wendy Lucas Bull, who's an amazing woman who brought a lot of wisdom into the business by starting this program, which got real deep engagement with cultural context, with social context, etc. And it enabled us as leaders and managers all the way through the business to really think hard about that lens that you're looking through at the world. How much of that lens is shaped by your own baggage, your own history, etc. And can you flip that open to a degree? No one is able to remove all of their thought processes and their patterns and their desires, but you are able to a degree to become aware of the lens that you're using and the ability to look through other people's lenses. And you see the world through that lens and you go, wow, that world is different. And it looks different and it is different. It's perceived validly differently. And that gives you insight into business opportunities, insight into people's motivations, team members' motivations. When you actually understand their perceived reality is their reality, and therefore is 100% true for them, it gives you a completely different way of engaging with team members, because you can see that you're just missing each other, but you could see where you're missing each other, and you can then get an understanding of how you could potentially do something about that. So that brings in their perspective, their diversity of thought, of challenge, of time, of how to address problems. I had some great experiences in FNB with exactly that, with nice, diverse teams who are able to just see business problems differently and also acting on them differently. I've got my way of acting, my style, the way I expect things of myself and the time frames and how I interact. But you project that too easily on everyone around you. And then they behave differently because people are different. They're not me. The person over there is not me. So understanding how that person would behave differently and trying to say, okay, well, maybe I'm quite diligent and you're not diligent, but you're creative. You can come up with an idea. So that means if I want you to follow up with something by 3 o'clock this afternoon, maybe it's not best that I give you that thing. Maybe I find somebody else in the team to handle that task, and I ask you to handle a creative task for me. Like, we need to come up with a better solution to this business problem. I'm stuck. I can't see my way through this problem. So let's sit down and you can see if you can unstick me in this particular problem. And that's where those different diversities of approaches and people in teams can get there. But you also have to be quite aware of yourself, quite aware of what you bring into the room, the impact that you have on the people around you, which is often a negative impact. You hinder people being fully themselves because of what they see from you. So walking into rooms, walking into situations and trying to create the best opportunity for all of that diversity of viewpoint, experience, history, etc., to actually work. And that's what I think it means to be a leader and a manager, is to create the right circumstance for everybody in the room to be fully themselves and connected with everybody else.
So what have you found to work to create that scenario?
Trying to understand people's motivations and trying to have conversations with them to actually unpick and get my understanding of what is important to them. What are the things they don't like doing? What are the things they like doing? And literally writing it down, doing an interview with somebody who works with you. And it's like, okay, what works, what doesn't work? Reflecting on what hasn't worked, things where they've let you down or you've been disappointed, or things where you've been really pleased with the way they've handled things. Write it down, think about, okay, how can I make them more successful in the next thing that we are working on together? So is it the task that I handle it? Is it the way that I have that interaction with somebody? Is it the situation? Some people work really well. I can drop you an email and ask you to do something. A lot of people don't work well that way. They want to be sat down across a table and to be able to be heard and spoken to and listen and self-create the tasks that they're working on in the way, and the discussion and the process is just as important to them as the content. So it might be very easy for a manager to fire off a list of instructions for people to handle, especially in a virtual world like we live in now, where everything's got to be done virtually, and I've got to ship out a memo to staff across the country. That's efficient. It might be necessary, but is it everything that could be done to make sure the person actually doing that work is fully engaged, fully committed, and contributed as much as they can? Because that way you'll find that they will then give more of themselves. They will find value in what they do, and they'll do a good job. I really believe that when people see value in what they're doing, they will do a good job. People are intrinsically good. They're not intrinsically lazy. They're not intrinsically bad. It's sometimes just helping them to find that place of meaning and value, and then you just let it go. You literally then, as a manager, you just let it go and it runs itself. And maybe that takes me back to my very first engagement with First Rand when I first joined FNB back in '98. The very first business mentor I ever had, Paul Harris, who was CEO of Rand Merchant Bank at the time, went on to lead First Rand and First Rand Holdings. He handed out a little book called Maverick. And I was one of the class officers who was lucky enough to start off. I think there were 7 of us who joined, and he gave each of us a copy of this book and said, read this book. It's like, what's this guy handing out a book? Is it your book? No, it's not your book. Book is called Maverick by an author called Ricardo Semler. And it's from the mid-90s. And it tells Ricardo's own story of being in Brazil, taking over his family's business, his dad's business, which was a very manufacturing, old school business, and how he had his own journey of learning how to be a maverick, how to engage in a modern way. And I mean, this is from the 90s, how to be a modern manager in a very old school, conservative Brazilian culture. And it's a beautiful little book, very digestible, very easy to read. He's found a couple of follow-up books. But Paul was a maverick himself. That was his style. He was, of the 3 founders of First Rand, he was the trader, the maverick. And so it appealed to him. And he tried to build a lot of that ethos into RMB. And anybody in Rand Merchant Bank from those days will know that's what Paul was about, and what a lot of First Rand was about creating innovation, thinking innovatively. And that little book was one of those, read it and go, okay, so this is not a bank in the way I thought it was a bank. It has a banking license, but it's an entrepreneurial business that wants you to contribute and to be part of the business and to take the business forward. It just happens to have a banking license.
What a nice surprise to find yourself in an environment like that, and how it's shaped so much of your thinking. So, and what I'm really enjoying hearing as you relay how you do things is there's so much questioning. So everything you do seems to be attached to a question. And there's this, the answer is always, the answer to anything is always attached to the right question. And it sounds to me like you've just mastered the art of asking those right questions in different scenarios, in different environments, and with different people, which then brings you to the right solutions or answers. And thank you for sharing such wisdom with us. And it just flows from you. It's such a natural process. I don't know if you even realize what a natural part of you it is, because it just it's just there. So you've mentioned that one of your cherished successes was the eBucks. I mean, there's such an amazing story to that. Tell us about how you overcame some of the challenges in those days, because that's a while back, and that was quite a disruptor product such a while back. So what were the main challenges you experienced, and how did you lead it to such a success?
Well, thank you for the compliment along the way. And you speak about the thinking process. And I guess that might even relate back to my career before banking. I wasn't a banker all my life. I was actually a physicist originally. So I started off studying physics at varsity. And I guess it's probably because I was a physicist and a scientist. So as a scientist, you always apply the scientific method to anything. The scientific method is form a hypothesis about something, an idea of how the world works, and then try and destroy it. Try to break your hypothesis. If you keep failing to break your hypothesis, it's a good working hypothesis that you can continue to use this model. But your job as a scientist is to keep looking at things that will break your hypothesis, not prove it. It's easy to prove a hypothesis because, that's easy. It's to try and find reasons why what you're doing is not working. So the negative testing. So don't take an app and build an app and make it work. You're trying to break it. You're trying to find all the ways customers will use your app and enter in numbers instead of digits and break it and understand that. So I guess that goes back to my scientific background, which is always look at constructing a hypothesis and then trying to keep checking your hypothesis. Hold it very gently. My view of my views is held very, very gently. I am very prepared to throw away an idea, a view, a perception, something like that, if I can find a better one that fits better. That applies to everything from conspiracy theories to my interactions with people. Is hold things gently and always be prepared to look at them. What you try and hold tightly onto is your values and your ethics. And that comes from the heart. How do you feel about something is typically what comes out there. But what you think as to why something's happening, be prepared to swap that out all the time. Switching back to eBucks, I think one of the first challenges we had is to form a team.
Just wanted to stop you there. That was beautiful. Wow. Hold things gently. Because too many business leaders and entrepreneurs hold so tightly onto their things that they dig a hole for themselves. And so I love that. Hold those things gently, but hold tightly onto the things that matter, like your values. Wow. Lovely. Thank you.
Pleasure. It is, I think, one of my operating models. In terms of eBucks was a fascinating challenge, and I was very privileged to have that opportunity to work with a great set of people. I think we had many of the right ingredients, so we were extremely lucky. We were in the right time at the end of 2000, end of 99, beginning of 2000, right at the peak of .com, at the .com boom, which gave us the timing to be aware of what's going on, but also to be aware of what wasn't working. We'd already seen things like pets.com and some of the hype cycle that was there. So we had enough awareness to be able to see that not everything that's .com is going to succeed. Some things are actually just hyped up. So we had a little bit of the right timing on that. We had enough of the .com hype to be able to extract funding from our shareholders. Nothing happens without funding from somebody. So I was able to extract a line of credit from the First Rand board who said, we are prepared to back you to this particular amount of money. And we had a business plan. There are other times when, like now, there isn't maybe money around to back a particular venture. So you might have the best timing, the best idea, but without the right timing of the investors, you can't back it. So we were lucky to have that. We had investors with deep pockets. First Rand had money to be able to back something like that. Sometimes you have a great idea, but your investors have not a lot of money. Great investors, but they just don't have the money to support you. So we had that. We had great executive leaders. Paul Harris was our chairman. Michael was the first CEO that we brought into the business there. So a very high caliber of charismatic, strategic, intelligent leaders who could construct a team around them, who could attract resources to work on a project. Because it was a project. It wasn't a business at the time. It was a project. Cool. And you had to attract people to work onto that through force of personality, through the interest of what we're doing. I mean, most people took pay cuts to work on the project, quite significant pay cuts through that, with no guarantee of success. The understanding was when you worked on eBucks, if it didn't work out, you left. It wasn't go back to your old division. Your job was filled in your old division. And if it didn't work out, you were cut and cheers, goodbye. So it wasn't like you got to play and if it doesn't work out, don't worry, you will look after you. So you had to be committed, you had to take a pay cut, and you had to work on something that was there, which meant that we were also able to attract good people, because only people with, you know, relatively high risk appetite and back themselves would come onto the project.
Yes.
Some amazing, you know, people came into that, some of whom have gone on to do great things. I mean, 2 consecutive FNB CEOs were part of eBucks. So those are entrepreneurs who backed themselves and who had the skills and talent to be able to create energy and to do things themselves. We had a customer base. Don't underestimate the importance of a captive customer base. Yeah. I think that's probably the dirty little secret of eBucks, is that they were able to sell it to all of the FNB card and then MTN customers, etc. So we got scale quite quickly. So we were able to take advantage of existing customer bases, which is a strategic relationship. eBucks was a separate division, but it was still part of FirstRand, and therefore we could do that. So getting the customer base was a key one. So those are some of the ingredients. Oddly enough, technology was one of the barriers. We had to write code. It didn't come out the box. We actually had to start and write our databases, write our data elements, write the code, create the interfaces, manage that, everything. So that was one of the bits, the hardest bit of work was writing the code. The business itself was there. Because writing the code was hard, and we made lots of mistakes. I can't remember how many times we threw away. And we sort of, okay, we're re-architecting this, we're re-platforming this, we're redesigning everything. And take us 2 months to throw everything away and build on top, which is also a bit like driving a bus, changing the engine while you're in the middle of running up and down. So when you're running a business and you're changing the operating system, you still have to run the business. So you sort of like hope nobody notices while you're quickly changing the engine out underneath and changing drivers. So it's hard work. The actual technology operations is surprisingly hard work. And we had problems, we had downtime, we had issues. I remember some really dramatic, tense times when, the systems were down and all of us were like leaning over the one key developer's shoulders, like, have you found it yet? Have you found it yet? Answering the phones, telling customers, sorry, we've got a problem. We can't get something working. Having senior management on our heads saying, guys, I'm getting phone calls. Tell me what's going on. Tell me you've fixed it. So some very traumatic, very tense times trying to get the tech to work. And there was gremlins and bugs, human error, accidents, things that just happen for no good reason other than, it's just that time that things do happen to you. At the internal level, there were politics. Everyone always pretends that, everyone in a company wants everyone else to succeed. Anyone who's worked in a large corporate knows that not everyone wants everyone to succeed. There is a survival of the fittest, an active politicking that goes on. It's about what are the rules of that politicking, and is it a healthy competition or can it be unhealthy? Because some of that is just healthy. People who are good leaders get to rise up and show through their actions that they are worthy of higher office in a company and to be able to take higher leadership positions. Sometimes the politicking is negative. And I guess in every company, there's a blend of both. And a lot of it is dependent by the leaders. FirstRand had great leaders, so the politicking was relatively benign, relatively helpful. But that's not to say there weren't people who had agendas, who were dragged reluctantly into the eBucks world. Afterwards, they often tell the story differently. It's always your choice afterwards to tell the history as you would like it to be told. But there was challenges in getting people to participate. And a lot of that had to be solved through human interactions. You can't force somebody to be part of this. You actually have to sit down with them, take the time to explain what you're trying to achieve, take the time to listen to why they have a problem with what you're doing. Or do they really have a problem? Is it just their natural style to be somewhat resistant, and it doesn't matter what you're doing? It's just not going to be terribly exciting to them, even though they might even support you, but it doesn't look like support. So we actually built up a stakeholder map. We put up a grid, and we put up the level of support that somebody had for the initiative and the level of importance that support was to us. It's a simple stakeholder grid. And then we map people against it. And you find those people who are very strong supporters, but not terribly important. Great. Bring them to your cocktail party. Maybe get them to, give you a testimonial. Then you have those people who are resistant to what you're doing and very important to what you're doing. Problem. You got to figure out a strategy for them. But have a strategy for that particular team, that division, that person, etc. And use that stakeholder map to figure out not just one business strategy to the organization, but individualized strategies to say, okay, for this particular person, they're not going to play ball. It's really important. So we have to have a strategy, maybe sideline them, isolate them, bypass them, walk around them, don't have anything to do with it, minimize the interaction, or at least expect that all interaction is going to be fractious and just deal with it and just not expect to win them over. Or find strategies that will win them over. Bring an ally, find somebody they trust, get that person to bring them along, etc. So we did spend quite a bit of time on trying to make sure that all of FirstRand worked together, because we weren't a standalone business that was out completely doing our own thing. We were part of FirstRand. We had to play nicely with the rest of FirstRand, and we needed them. We didn't write the core banking system. We connected to the core banking system. They had an API where we could write transactions backwards and forwards. It's actually very modern. Back in 2000, FNB's system was running open APIs that we could connect and write transactions onto it. So we were able to use that, but therefore we're dependent on it. Dependent means you have to make sure you understand what your dependency is and manage that dependency. Make sure you understand if you do something, if you break them, what's going to happen to them. If they break you, what happens there? And obviously then construct a proposition and take it to customers. So all of this side is managing internal. What are your dependencies? What are your service providers? What are you doing to make it happen? There's the team of people who handle that and who construct. And then there's the, how do we get it to customers? How do we market this? How do we sell it? How do we get customers into the system? How do we make sure they come on board? And how do we service them? Remember, once you've got a customer, it's not like you take the customer's money and you run. When it's selling baked beans, financial services are a service. They're an ongoing relationship of 20 years. You might have persuaded somebody to click on your link now. You will be doing business with their customers for 20 years in one form or other. You might even be doing business with their children. So if you've got that sort of relationship, you have to make sure your service standards are high, that you understand what they're expecting of you, how to service, how to solve problems, how to fix issues, how to handle when you break something and it's material to a customer. It's not just our policy is, sorry, that's just how it is. Really think about, you've actually broken something of value. And, money is important. It's actually one of the things we looked into very early on when we were building the systems. We brought in a consultant who worked with us, who'd worked previously with NASA, the space agency in America. And, at first his view was, well, you're just building a banking system. So if things go wrong, it's not really that important. After about working with us for about a week or two, he changed his mind. He said, you're working with people's money. That's actually important. And we love to live in a world where lives are important and more important than anything else, etc. What we figured out is people's money is actually very important to them. Yeah. It's right up there with critical things that matter to people. And when you're given the responsibility of looking after somebody's money, you have to take that responsibility to heart. You have to take it very seriously.
Wow, again, that real scientific approach in how you handled everything in terms of the upsides and the downsides of this eBucks story. I love the map, the wall map and not mapping out the value chain and the technology, but people. I like that really works because it makes it so tangible. And having an individual strategy for each person I think is really clever because that gets real personal. And I'm sure you had success then in overcoming the resistance when you create personal strategies like that. I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that's what helps to break down the resistance with an individual when you take the time to get personal and understand what their needs are and how you're going to get around their resistance. So really great way of
Yeah. Some success. I think perhaps the success more was in framing what was going on.
Okay.
That we had a better understanding and a more granular understanding of what was going on with our interactions with all of the different areas, the different people, the different teams. And that allows you to make better expectations. You have a better sense of, okay, so what can I expect from this? What can I do that's going to make this better? Because the job was to obviously launch the business and make the business successful. And that needed other people to come with. And I think that's what a lot of initiatives, a lot of entrepreneurs actually work as intrapreneurs. They work inside a business, launching a new product line, launching a new channel, launching a new business inside a business. I think we always look at entrepreneurs as being the guy who sits outside or the lady who sits outside and creates something new and is completely separate. But I actually think a lot of innovation happens inside companies. And that's where you have to think carefully about the context that you're landing something in and your goal. How important is your goal? What happens if you succeed in launching that initiative, but you burn that personal relationship? What's going to be the consequences of that? Maybe that's not a good thing to burn that personal relationship, because that could backfire on you in the future when this initiative is just a product initiative. It's run, it's launched, it's over. 6 months later, you've got the success out of it. Now you want to continue working with that colleague in the organization for the next 5 years. How are you going to be able to continue to interact with them with authenticity and with some sense of dignity? So also having that and understanding those was quite important. We didn't manage to persuade everybody. Absolutely. There's some people who thought we were doing the wrong thing. And in some cases, they might even have been right. Just because eBucks is successful and has, thousands of customers or millions of customers, and we're able to pay off the startup loan and be successful, doesn't necessarily mean that their views weren't correct. We took some chances. We did some things that we had to fix afterwards. When you launch a business, version 1 was very flaky. We spent the first year after launch actually putting things back together that should have been there in the beginning. So, it didn't look like much happened, but we're frantically busy for the year after, like fixing all the holes and making sure customer service is working and fixing the tech. And I think that's many entrepreneurs' story. Is that you fake it at first. It looks like something wonderful. Behind the scenes, it's made of cardboard and paper and it's manual. Yeah. And as soon as you find out that customers like what you're doing, you frantically go and shore up the bits and put concrete and supports underneath it so that you can fix it. But that's a good thing, because you didn't have to invest in all the concrete and steel in the beginning for something that customers didn't want.
Absolutely.
Remember that. You don't know what customers want in the beginning. You have an idea,
yes,
but you don't really know.
Yes. Fantastic. So we're in a phase at the moment of massive reinvention, whether you want it or not. We've got such economic disruption and chaos globally that I'm seeing it in my coaching business, with so many entrepreneurs and executives, where whether they like it or want it, there is a phase of reinvention that is necessary right now. So with you having been through so many disruptive type of products, services, so many different types of companies, and working with so many stakeholders, what would you say, what advice would you give to someone facing potentially a scary place where if they don't make this transformation or reinvent themselves or their business, they're going to be left behind? What, from your experience, how would you help someone approach that and rather see the other side of it than the wall in front of them right now?
Yeah, no, I think it is scary. I think acknowledging that we are in scary times. We are not in normal times, and we're not going to go back to normal times. We're going to a new normal. And I think accepting that is an important part of seeing where you are in your company, in your personal life, and everything like that. Is look carefully and see it clearly, and recognize that your company's revenues are down 40%. Your growth curve for the company is definitely challenged. A particular competitor has risen up and is, really doing well. Take the time to look at that and to see it as it is. Then forecast forward. Take the trends as they are. Forecast into them. Don't be scared of going, well, it's going to be different and it's going to revert back. It's going to be different and probably going to be more different as time goes on. So expect that to accelerate away, and be aware of exponential curves. Exponential curves look completely flat until such time as they go completely vertical. There's an inflection point, but you don't really notice it. And you see it in some particular behaviors. Payments, I know quite well. Payment adoption is extremely slow until it turns. And when it turns dramatically. And you find that the old behaviors get left behind very quickly. A bit like social media. A new social media app is launched and nobody has it until suddenly everybody has it and nobody's without it. And the old app disappears. The old one disappears. So be aware of things can change quite fast, and those curves, pay particular attention to the curves, to recent data as to what's happening. Look at what you're not seeing. Remember, we are all, fed a very small set of the real world. If you look at the news, you get the news from a little pipe this big. You don't see the news of what's really going on. You're getting the news that you are subscribed to. In the same way, you're getting the data that you are looking for, not the world out there. So be very sensitive to the filters that exist on the information that you're looking at, and try actively to seek out other forms of information. And often that is quite easy to get by just taking the trouble, and it's often anecdotal. If you want to know something, ask somebody, give them the time to listen, and don't do a survey which gives you 72% of respondents like this. Phone 5. Talk to 5 of them and let them just talk your ear off about what they really want. And you only really need to listen to 5. It doesn't need to be a large number, but listen actively to what they're doing and to probe into what's going on. That'll give you a sense of what's going on outside there. And then, be prepared to come up with some ideas that are bold, that are not what you're doing at the moment done again. Find something that is, perhaps what your competitor's doing. Don't be scared of doing what your competitor's doing. Just think about something that is actively different and that will appeal to customers. Make a little thought experiment and then try it out. It's really not hard to try things out with customers. Even if you're in a financial services market where you've got sophisticated investment products that go to people, construct a little paper pitch. Go to somebody and say, imagine I could offer you this paper pitch. How do you feel about that? You haven't gone and built some fancy Excel model which talks about how you haven't built the trading platform that goes with it. You've just done a little pitch and somebody says, it's sort of okay, but here's my problem. Problem 1, problem 2, problem 3. Those are fatal problems. Good thing I didn't go and build all of this, because there are fatal problems in my idea. I didn't think about that. I didn't realize that. Try out little paper products, little curated propositions, and see how people like them. And generally, you'll find that people like it because they'll take it off your hands. They'll come through the screen, through the telephone, and take the product away from you. When you've got people pulling your product out of your hands, then you know it's working. Up until then, you've got something that's interesting. Keep trying until people start phoning you at night for your access to the product. Then you know you've got it. So keep keep experimenting, keep failing. So keep trying things out, and don't be discouraged by the things that go wrong, because everything that goes wrong actually is a learning experience to understand. If you see things as a failure, you just haven't yet understood what is the learning experience you're supposed to get from it. There is always a learning experience. Even if that learning experience is that I feel bad when I fail, that's still a learning experience about you, your personality, your intrinsic drivers, and that sort of stuff. So also be careful. Don't do the same thing again and again. You can have the same learning experience repeated many times. Is not wisdom, it's stupidity. But get to that point, and don't be scared of having that, and don't be frightened of the world out there. You have to carve your place in the world. And there was a quote, I wish I could remember who it's from. We could probably Google it, but it's, don't be scared of the world. The world should be scared of you.
Ooh.
And I was just like, wow, yeah, I want to be that guy, that girl, that the world's scared of me because of what I'm creating and what I'm doing out there. That makes me feel motivated and energetic about that.
Very nice, very nice, and it's and a good scared that they are of you. And sure, you've distilled it so beautifully in so many amazing points. I mean, that would be an incredible vlog, the way you've outlined how to go about reinventing yourself and thinking about it in such a clear way. And again, just those beautiful questions, thinking forward, and being bold. And I love, yes, don't be scared of the world, let the world be scared of you. Really nice. Which means you've got to be bold. You've got to put yourself out there and be doing something and not being afraid of failing. Wow, thank you. That was really such wisdom and crystallized so beautifully. Thank you. So what excites you about the future? You're someone that lives quite in the future. So what excites you most about the future?
Just that it's unknown. I think that's interesting. It's unknown, but to some degree predictable. And I think that's where the scientist in me sort of goes, you can forecast quite a bit. Sometimes you listen to the radio and you listen to a new song and you go, I think that's going to be a hit. It's just got the right sort of beat. It's got the right sort of lyrics. It drives with I understand what popular music is nowadays. I think that song's going to be a hit, even though on its first play. We've all had that feeling of like, it's not just my artist. I think that's got some recipe to it. And if you think so, it probably is going to be some sort of a hit. And you can go, well, I saw it coming. I think like all of us like to see it coming. We'd like to be able to have some form of control on the world. Now, in reality, we don't. We have very little control over what happens around us in the world. But if you engage actively with the future, by thinking about it, by forecasting it, by seeing what could happen, what the scenarios are, it does give you a feeling, a little more sense of control, because you are actively working on it and with it. Even though it is largely unpredictable, that does give you some more comfort in your day-to-day life, that you're not just a victim of what tomorrow is going to throw at you, because you are actively working on what you're going to throw back at tomorrow. So that gives you a little more sense of comfort and activity and wholeness about yourself. So maybe that's rationalizing it. The future is scary. One doesn't know what tomorrow is going to throw at you, and it can throw some very horrible things. It can also throw some wonderful things, and only tomorrow will tell. So that means you've got to be prepared. That means you've got to do what you do today to be ready for tomorrow.
Absolutely. Anything else you would love to share before we wrap up?
I think my life has been full of some very happy things and some very lucky things. I have seen some good quotes about luck, that you make your luck. Yeah. That luck doesn't just happen to you. It's about what you do it. But I think it's also because you look at life and try and find meaning in what you do, in what you do at work. If you find meaning in what you do at work, then you can find a sense of soul and purpose, which means those 8 to 10 hours, and in entrepreneur's case, 15 hours a day that you spend working, are things that you actually like and you actually get value and pleasure for it. And that means that you can go to bed at night saying, I've had a good day because I've spent 15 hours creating, dealing with crises, dealing with everything, but I've actually enjoyed my 15 hours at work. I'm not, looking back on it resentfully. I'm looking back on it with a little bit of happiness and a little bit of gladness as having done something. And I can look forward to tomorrow as being 15 more hours of something like that with the right, mindset and approach to it. So try and find some meaning and love in what you do, and you will find the meaning and love comes back at you.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. There's been so much meaning in the time that we've shared together. And you said you wrote a book. What was the title of the book?
Oh, I've got 2 books underway, both of them unfinished. The one is a book of CEO lessons. So it is effectively notes to myself as to how to run companies. I've been fortunate to be a CEO of several different companies over many times. And a lot of it is unconventional wisdom and possibly, not politically correct and appropriate, but it's notes to myself about things that I think I have learned along the way. And the other one is the book of eBucks, which is the story of eBucks, which has got some elements of my experiences and that in that. Both of them could not possibly be considered books yet. They are writings. My book of eBucks, I've got, about 360 pages done. So that's got a fair amount of work on it, but still quite a lot more to do before it's anywhere near polished.
Well, after what I've heard today, Angus, that book beckons. The way you've crystallized such an amazing array of thoughts and brought it to us in such a beautifully distilled way. We await your book in anticipation. So hopefully this will be an inspiration to finish off one of those books. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us and for being an inspiration in going out there and disrupting markets and not being afraid to go out and just be bold. That's what you've done so often. You've just, you've gone there and head on into the unknown. And I believe that more of us need to do that. And the more of us that do that, the unknown becomes known. And that's the way in which we create and innovate, and it becomes an adventure rather than something to be scared of. And I absolutely loved your quote, where don't be scared of the world, let the world be scared of you. And so let's go out there and put our best foot forward and create the meaning. So thank you for, I've loved every bit of this time together with you and getting into the workings of your mind, which is a really deep mind. Thank you for that and what you bring into the world and revolutionizing payment systems so that it can be easier for us to make payments all over the world.
Thank you, Fawn. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed the time to reflect a little bit and to have the opportunity to share. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. And to all of you watching or listening, let's really take to heart what Angus has brought to us. He's brought such amazing lessons and deep insights born out of being in the trenches. This is not academia. And when we take these kind of lessons to heart, it doesn't have to be scary. So as he so beautifully put it, let's go out there, reinvent ourselves, see it clearly for what it is, because it's not that difficult to actually see what's really going on. Do those forecasts, be bold. And I love the idea of a thought experiment. So let's connect with ourselves, let's connect with each other, let's co-create and collaborate more than We actually compete because that's what we need to be doing to get through the challenges that we're going through right now. And when we connect deeply with our own thinking processes and bring other people into it, we will create opportunities and overcome the barriers. And for sure, we have an opportunity to create a new human story.